Hello, everyone. So, welcome to Tea with ATA. And because today we have a very complex question that many of you guys asked about, so we are gonna cover this in multiple episodes. But let me start, as we always do, by greeting Professor Zage. Hi, Professor Zage. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Dr. Ahmed. Thank you again for having me here, and I look forward to our session today.
Thank you so much. So, today's question is from Nancy, and she asked, "What should I do if I feel overwhelmed with my workload?" So let me give you the mic. Thank you.
Well, I think to begin with, I think all of us get really busy in what we do at our jobs. And it's very easy to feel overwhelmed with everything that goes on. So I think this is an excellent question that we all need to think about as we go about our daily tasks. And I think as we can go through this, we'll try and give you some tips on how to handle the situation and how to feel a little bit better about it. But don't be too concerned. It's very normal to feel overwhelmed. It's very normal to look at all of these things and have to begin to deal with them. So I think we will go through a number of different tips and ideas today. And Dr. Ahmed, if you want to start us off here, we'll get going.
Sure. I totally agree that it's really important to address this overwhelming issue than neglecting it, because if we just neglect this, it will affect our productivity and it will affect even our motivation. So it's really important for us to start with the first step, which, in my opinion, I see very important, which is prioritizing the tasks. So having those tasks that are really important and urgent, because we don't want to feel that we are under stress and overthinking and feeling overwhelmed. So how do you feel about prioritizing tasks in a way that it can minimize this overwhelming feeling? Thank you.
Well, I think that's an excellent place to start because when you have a big project, you have to begin to look at all the things that are going to be involved with it. And so prioritizing the tasks is the best way to get you started and to keep you on track. And to do that, there are some tips that we look at when you're prioritizing things. The very first thing that you have to do is to break down all the number of tasks that are a part of it and look at them from their sense of how urgent are they? Is there time sensitivity with any of these tasks? Taking a look at this, are you working on a deadline? Do you have to have part one done by next Friday and part two? You need to have that all put together. And will delaying any of these tasks, is that going to have consequences somewhere down the line? So the first part of this is looking at the time sensitivity of all the tasks that you have to do. I used to use a list, and I would just draw it out on a list. And then you start to go down and you put check marks by which one is first and second, and you're trying to do that. Then you also have to consider what's dependent upon what gets done. Are there other people or other areas of the business that can't do anything until you finish your task? And a good example here is a manufacturing area. In manufacturing, it's often set up into individual steps where person does part A, another person does part B, another person does part C. Well, the person doing part B can't do it until the person with part A is finished. And so it gets passed from part A to part B to part C. And so you have to look at this when you're prioritizing these tasks. Who else is dependent upon you getting this done? Are they going to be in trouble if you don't get it to them? Are they going to be out of work? Third thing I look at here is what are your resources? Do you have available resources? You have to have your available resources before you can start. I mean, think about this. If you were going to be going to something that dealt with swimming, well, you have to have a swimming suit. You have to have a towel. These are simple things, but they're part of that. They're the resources that make it necessary for you to do what you're going to do. When I worked back in the hospital many years ago, we used, actually, before digital things, we actually used film to take x-rays. Well, if you didn't have the film, you couldn't take the x-rays. So you have to know what your resources are. And then you start to look at the importance of the task. How much value will each task add to the completed project? If it doesn't have a lot of value, don't spend a lot of time on it. Don't add a lot of people to it. Make that happen quickly. And the last thing is you have to judge how much effort is required in each task so that you'll be able to figure out what are the most difficult parts of this to take care of. Once you know what's the most difficult, now you can begin to put together all the resources that you need to attack that, to get into it, to work with it. Some things are going to need higher energy, physical energy. Some things are going to need higher mental energy. And so you need to be able to take a look at all of those things as you're prioritizing. It's a quick summary of prioritizing, but it's one of the things that we look at in trying to figure out how do we answer this question.
Great. Thank you for sharing, because actually, I think based on what you said, this will help the person to maintain the focus and not being jumping from a task to a task and having a lot of unfinished tasks. Because you're right, when you are really prepared and you are really having all your resources ready, you are gonna ensure success because you have the resources and the timeline with you, plus you are prioritizing the tasks. So this will take me to the third point. In my opinion, it's really important to have those realistic goals, have those smart goals, because you mentioned the timeline, you mentioned making sure that you know exactly when you need to finish this task and how the tasks are depending on each other. So how do you feel having a realistic goal in this journey, the journey of overcoming this feeling of overwhelming? Thank you.
Setting goals is one of the most important things that we can do in any business, in any task, in any project that we're working on. The biggest problem that people look at today is they see this monumental task in front of them. And let's use, for example, that you're in charge of building a new wing on a building. Well, the architect may have given you a picture of what it looks like, and that's great. But this is a big project. And so when you start to look at this, you have to have goals of how to get there. And that goes back to the prioritization piece, where what's your goal for achieving the first step? What's your goal for achieving the second step? We used to celebrate goals all the time as we would build a building. We'd have a celebration after the permits were issued. We'd have a celebration after the foundation was put together. But those are the things that you have to look at. What's your goal for being able to do that? If you say you're going to build a building and it's going to be up by next Friday, that's never going to happen. And people are not going to go along with something if it's not realistic. So there's a couple of key things that we have to look at when we talk about setting goals. The first thing is being specific in that goal. What exactly do you want to do? It sounds crazy to say that, but people sometimes forget the easiest things. What exactly are you trying to accomplish? So you need to be able to do that. The second piece, and one of the biggest of them, is that all the goals need to be measurable. If you can't measure it, it's not a goal. How do you know if you've achieved it if you can't measure it? So you have to find some mechanism that you're going to use to measure this. Maybe it's going to be time. Maybe it's going to be the foundation is actually in. Those are things that you have to be able to deal with, to look at. But if you can't measure it, you never know whether you're being successful or not. Third thing is achievability. Is it realistic? You may have a plan to build a skyscraper that's 400 stories tall. Well, that looks great on paper and it makes a nice story to write up and it's a nice fairy tale. But is it realistic? And the answer is no. So you have to look at your goals and see, are they realistic? Are they things that can be achieved? And is the timeline that you set, is that something that you can work with as well? Saying you're going to get something done very quickly is great, but setting a goal that's realistic is much more important. And it has to be something you can actually do. And then I look at the relevancy of the goal. Does this goal actually relate to something that's important to you or to the business or in your life? If it's not relevant, you're not going to work very hard at it. Trying to achieve it isn't going to be something that's going to be top of your mind. So it needs to be something that's relevant. Now, maybe it's relevant to the business. Maybe it's relevant to you personally. Maybe it's relevant to your career. What is the relevancy? And the last piece of this goes back to the time piece that we've talked about. When do you want to achieve it? Understanding the when is the biggest part of setting a goal, because you can set a goal, but you have to have a timeline that's going to be something that is realistic, that is achievable. And one of the other things to think about here is as you set your goal and you begin to let other people know what the goal is, if they don't see it as realistic, they're not going to be very committed to it either. So you have to keep people involved by making it realistic, making it workable, making it something that they can actually see the progress that they make and understand that they're making their progress towards the finish line. Oftentimes, there are fundraising campaigns, and they always put together this big picture of a thermometer. And as they raise more funds, the thermometer gets filled more and more and more and higher and higher and higher so that people can see what's going on and they can see where they're at on the timeline and where they're at with their goal. That's what makes it possible to achieve this and to make it so that you can go forward. Dr. Ahmed,
Thank you for sharing.
where
Thank you for
okay.
sharing. Very thoughtful, very thoughtful. Thank you, because I can see the value of the buy-in from the people when they see the realistic goal. They are really committed and they are more willing to achieve the goal because they believe in it. They see that it's realistic. So, talking about the people, I see also one of the great points is delegation. So, I feel if we have this ability to delegate, we will be able to overcome this feeling of overwhelming when you have a lot of things on your shoulder, because you are now having this skill of delegation when you choose the right people who can do the task because they have the capacity of helping and they are having the competencies and skills to achieve this task very successfully. So, how do you see delegation in this journey of overcoming the overwhelming feeling? Thank you.
I think delegation is probably one of the most difficult things for people to learn because they feel like they're putting the work off to somebody else, and it's something that they don't want to do. People want to tend to grab hold of something and to make it theirs. Delegation is really the effective way to get things done in a large project. One person can't do it all, and so you have to learn to effectively delegate. This involves other people. That gets them interested in it. That gets their ideas and thoughts working on it. And so effective delegation doesn't mean that you push all your responsibilities to somebody else. It means that you're sharing responsibilities with other people and looking for other people who have expertise, knowledge, or the ability to handle certain things quicker, more efficiently, better than I can do it. Somebody else can be involved in that. So first of all, as we look at this, if you want to effectively delegate, one of the first things that you have to do is to be able to try and choose the right person. So you've got a task that needs to be done. You want somebody to do it. you have to look for the right person, somebody that has the right skill set, the right strengths, the right knowledge, so that they will be able to do the work. That makes it much easier if they have that skill set and you don't have to teach them everything from the beginning. So I think that's one of the things that we start with. The second piece that you have to look at is explaining your reasoning. Many times when somebody gets something handed to them or delegated to them, they may be upset. And this can go back to the very first question. They're already overwhelmed with their workload, and now you've come and you've asked them to do something else. So you need to explain to them why you want them involved in this, why you want them to be a part of that. You may want to explain that this is to help them further develop their skills. You may want to explain that they have the most knowledge of something, or they've done this before, or they've proven track record for some of these things. And so that's part of what you want to look at. But if you don't explain to somebody why you're delegating a task to them, they may resent that as just more work being dumped on them. Third piece here, provide clear instructions. When you delegate something to somebody, you have to be very clear. What do you want them to do? It's very easy to say, okay, Dr. Ahmed, you go build that building over there. Well, you have to give them some clear instructions. Maybe it's something they've done before. You still need to give them clear instructions. And then don't micromanage them. Don't stand over them telling them everything to do. Let them do this, because this is part of now a goal of theirs to get this project done. If you need to provide some training or some resources, this is the time to do that. This is how you get them involved, and maybe they develop their career a little more, they learn a little bit more, they become better at something. We always talk about practice makes perfect. Well, the more somebody does something, the better they're going to get at it. One of the toughest things with delegation, though, that we have to think about, when you delegate something, you have to delegate some authority to that person to be able to do the job. If they have to come back to you every time to get approval on everything, you might as well have not delegated it to begin with. So you have to give them some authority to do something, that they can order some supplies, or they can hire some people, or they can change schedules, or they can do things without me going back and butting in on it. If this is how it's going to work for them, they have to have the authority to do that. That's also a motivational piece. If you grant somebody some authority, you're also motivating them to do something. Now, a couple of the last pieces that go along with this, you do need to check in on the project. You do need to be able to provide some constructive feedback. If there's something that you can help them with, do that. You've made them ultimately responsible, but the bigger picture says, I'm still responsible for the project, so I need to know what's going on. And if I can help them, I will. I don't want to butt in, but if I can help them, I will. But I also need to check in, because when we go back and we look at like goal setting, there are timelines on these things. Well, are they meeting the timelines? If not, why not? So we need to be able to help them with that. And the last part of delegation, this should be the easiest, but it's probably the most forgotten, is saying thank you. Thank the people for the work that they've done. When they've done this job and they've done all this, thank them. Thanks, you did a great job. I'm really proud of that. I'm really impressed with it. Celebrate it somehow, because recognition is motivation. And when you thank somebody and you praise them for what they've done, you've motivated them to continue and do more. So again, going back and looking at this overwhelming project that we're dealing with, this question to begin with, part of dealing with that overwhelming stuff, that overwhelming pile of things that just dropped on your desk, is being able to understand how and why to delegate some of that off for other people to do it. Nobody expects one person to do everything. Delegate that. It helps motivate people. It helps get them involved. It helps them to advance their careers. Those are pieces that you want to look at.
That's very powerful. That's very powerful. I also see that it's really important for the person who delegate to have the trust between him and the other person, because a lot of people, as you mentioned, they are doing micromanaging because they still feel that they are the only people who can do the job. So if you are having this feeling that you are the only person who do the job, why should you delegate? You should give the trust, you should give the empowerment, and as you mentioned, you should give the authority to ensure that this person is successful, and also to ensure that you have this balance. You are not overwhelmed. So I think today we really shared 4 valuable tips. Let me summarize them, and we can continue more tips on the next episode. So today, Professor Zage, we talked about prioritizing tasks and breaking them down and setting realistic goals. And as you mentioned, delegating to the right person at the right time. So thank you so much, everyone. It was a pleasure to be with you today. And stay tuned for more tips about how to overcome this overwhelming feeling. Thank you, Professor Zage.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Very good to see you, and we'll talk again soon.